on Channel 4, Killer Films.
The history of the horror genre began in 1896, where George Méliès' film The Haunted Castle was first shown. The French film is known as one of the first horror films as its continued supernatural elements and vampires. The film lasted for just 3 minutes and was a silent film, so all was shown through visuals. Moving on to the 1910s, the most memorable and well-known horror film of that era was produced. Frankenstein, created by Edison Studios, shocked the world for its first use of monster. It lasted a total of 16 minutes, what was considerably longer than The Haunted Castle, but through the time it has become an iconic masterpiece. Through the years, other films of the same genre were made, such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1920, and The Phantom of the Opera in 1925. Each film was trying to top one another in how frightening the film can be. It wasn't until the 1960s where the devil was being accepted into horror films such as Rosemary's Baby, which was released in 1968. This led to the release of more films with occult themes in the 1970s, such as The Exorcist. The 20th century saw horror films built upon a psychological fears, but towards the end of the 1990s, more visual gore was being included in films. With blood spurting everywhere and bones breaking in revolting scenarios, audiences were being exposed to the 21st century's horror film. The world-famous horror film with the most gore and violence was released in 2004 and directed by James Wan. Saw exploded onto our screens with a mix of gruesome flesh, ripping materials and a psychological backstory. The American production company, Lionsgate, spent just under $2 million in creating the film and gained $103 million in the box office. So, why do we feel the need and want to see these films?
Do you watch horror films?
Yep.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yes, I do.
Why do you think you enjoy them?
I think it's the adrenaline rush, like it scares you and you like that sort of feeling, if that makes sense, because it's like on a roller coaster, you just love the feeling of like no control, if that makes sense.
The thrill and the story and the sort of the tense, like and the sort of presence when you're waiting for a certain part or certain scene to come on, and then it gets you like when you don't expect it as much.
It's just the tension and build up to what might happen, but then I do find them funny sometimes. I can't really take it seriously.
Yeah, what you said, I can't take it seriously, I just laugh at them, to be honest.
One horror film that scares you the most, and why?
I'd probably say Paranormal Activity.
I'd say like zombie films, they scare me.
Why do you think they do?
Well, with Paranormal Activity, you don't know what's coming and it could be unexpected, I reckon.
I think with zombie films, it's more the fact that you're being chased and there's nothing to stop it. Like, you can't like, well, there is something to stop it, but like, it's the fact that you're running away from something and it's still coming after you, and it's like when a shark, like you can feel it like around your feet and stuff. It's like,
Sinister.
Oh, Sinister, that is a messed up
isn't
film.
out yet, but
yeah, man. Sinister, yeah.
I mean, I watched that film, yeah, because for me, yeah, it could like just go out of my mind like instant. I could watch it, just think about something else, and I'd watch it and I wouldn't be as scared. But I watched Sinister, it's sort of like eating kids alive and sort of hanging. Like, I don't know what it was. And to me, I was thinking I was like, this film is actually the ish. It actually got me. So yeah, man, Sinister, I'll go for anyway.
Yeah.
Like all horror films, they're just amusing rather than to the point. They have no storyline, no sense really. That's why I get annoyed at them.
Which horror films do you think scare you more? Is it psychological or like gore?
More psychological, I guess.
Psychological.
I think it's psychological.
Yeah, I mean, gory not as much. I mean, certain parts, if you see like bones breaking or sort of like sticking out sort of thing,
that's
or some slow torture, I don't know.
Nasty.
But I'd actually go for, what was the other? Psychological, yeah, I'll go for that stuff.
So how far can the films go before having a serious effect on the viewer?
The youngest murderers this century were driven at speed to an indefinite future in custody, detained at Her Majesty's pleasure.
It was the crime that shocked a nation. 2-year-old James Bulger murdered by 2 schoolboys not much older than himself. This now iconic CCTV footage shows the moment in 1993 when 10-year-olds John Venables and Robert Thompson snatched the toddler in a Merseyside shopping centre, then led him by the hand to a railway line where they battered him to death.
I think horror films can have a negative effect. It depends on the person. I think it's very difficult, and I don't think there's any research that can show that the same film will have the same effect on everybody, and it depends on where somebody's coming from to begin with and what type of personality somebody has. I think some of the negative effects perhaps are more obvious when people are younger, and that's clearly why we don't show horror films to very young children.
From the age of 6 and 7, the Doncaster attackers were allowed to sit through Child's Play videos while their mother smoked cannabis, a relative claimed. The films featured scenes of graphic violence which many adults find too disturbing to watch. It was Child's Play 3 that came under scrutiny during the trial of Thompson and Venables in 1993.
Because children find it much more difficult to disassociate from or to differentiate between reality and fantasy. So what happens on the screen may be more real, and they might find it difficult. Whereas an adult will go and see a film, and you go and see a film and you're frightened and you jump and all that kind of stuff. And some of that, I think, is play acting. You put it on a little bit because that's what you want. But a child isn't able to differentiate and say, this is only a film.
One main advancement, what you're noticing more now, is films are trying to be explicitly gory, explicitly shocking. Yeah? You used to have films, say like Halloween, where you'd have a killer that would be on the loose, and it would be more about the suspense, the tension. Where is he? What's he going to do? It's getting dark. Where is he? Now, say Saw, for example, is all about how much blood can you make fire out of a person. Yeah, and we saw I've made what, 7 films, 8 films. The only reason people are watching them is because of the contraptions that kill them. The storyline's not great. It's all about shock value. That is the main advancement. Yeah, I think it is a negative thing because horror movies are almost being diluted now. In terms of, it's less about the suspense now, it's more about shock value. I don't like to think there's people out there that are purely watching films just to see how badly or how violently someone can be killed. It's a little bit weird, it's a bit torture porn. It's like they're getting off on watching that, how bad can it be, you know? And I think there's so far you can go with it.
So, do horror films have a psychological effect on the viewer? Over the years, there's evidence to suggest that they do. However, it's not every day that you hear about it happening. Does it depend on the type of person? Or the film itself? And how far are the media willing to go with this particular genre?